Well, good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Bridges Conversations. My name is Steve Givens. I'm the executive director of the Bridges Foundation in St. Louis. We are an organization that for the past 35 years or so have offered the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius Loyola in everyday life. And this year we have about 30 people in St. Louis doing the exercises. And what we do here once a month is just have a conversation with one of our friends or an expert sometimes on Ignatian spirituality, sometimes a friend and an expert. Today we are joined by a longtime friend of Bridges and someone I've had the privilege to know for the last 7 or 8 years also. So we're speaking today with Clarence Heller. Clarence is the coordinator of a really wonderful ministry here in St. Louis called Moments of Grace and Prayer. That is an ecumenical retreat in everyday life that lasts either a month or a week with regular check ins with spiritual reflectors. And he's going to talk a little bit more about that and tell you more about it. Clarence is a spiritual director, a prayer companion, a husband, a father, a grandpa, a friend of Jesus, a poet. We're going to talk about that a little bit later too, an artist, and a dreamer. And I think all those words define you pretty well. Good afternoon, Clarence.
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon. I'm really happy to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. We're going to get started in a minute. I'm going to let Clarence tell you all a little bit more about himself. There's a few people online I see already watching. If you have questions for Clarence as we go, please just type them into the not the comment section on Facebook, and I will see them if you do, and we'll get to them as we can. So, Clarence, tell us a little bit about you, your family of origin, your faith of origin. Um, little bit of a little short version of your life up until now, and how you came to first experience the spiritual exercise.
Okay. My wife and I went to the same elementary school, so that's pretty cool. I think she's a year older, so we say she's more mature than me.
Mm.
But so we've been married 46 years. We have 2 adult children, and blessed to have 3 grandsons. And it's really wonderful that we get to see them pretty often. So grew up Catholic, Roman Catholic, and went to Catholic elementary school, Catholic high school, and let's see, went to Rolla and got a degree in electrical engineering, and then actually went to WashU and got an MBA there, and worked in the electric utility business and then the development business. Much of my life went to Mass on Sunday because that's what you're supposed to do, but really wasn't a person of prayer. And then midlife, I had a conversion experience. And honestly, I was seduced by God. And I'm so grateful that I was. And so out of that experience, I decided to retire and to go study theology as a way to change my life. So in 2001, I made the decision to start attending Aquinas Institute of Theology. And at the same time, a friend of mine, knew of that decision, and a longtime family friend. She's a SSND. And she said, I have a friend, maybe you want to go talk with her. I said, well, of course, if you're, I'll go meet with her. And so it went with meet with her, and she was a Carondelet sister of St. Joseph. And we had a really nice conversation, talked about, who is God for me? What do I, want out of life, and that sort of thing. And she said, well, would you like to come back and have another conversation? I said, yeah, that'd be wonderful. This was nice. Well, what I found out was she's the spiritual director, and I had never heard of such a role as a spiritual director. So then we met, a couple times, and she said, well, I'm going away to teach at Creighton University for the summer. But there's this retreat, the spiritual exercises that I think, would be really good for you to do. It lasts about 9 months, and, it'll start in the fall. And so there's this organization, Bridges, that offers this retreat. And, go check it out. Go to one of their information sessions. And either you could do it with them or you could do it with me individually. And so I went to the information session. I was really impressed. It really was very clear that, it makes a big difference in people's lives. But then as I thought and prayed about it, I thought, this person is a real master. I mean, she's a real pillar in the Ignatian community. And so I chose to do it with her individually. And so that year in 2001, when I was doing the exercises and my first year at Aquinas, I mean, it just changed my life so much.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. So you did the retreat through her, but eventually you did become involved in Bridges. How did that come about, and what was that involvement like?
So how that came about, part of what happens when you come to know God and Jesus, and when you come to let them know you want others to have a similar experience. And so, at that time I was going to Aquinas, and when I first started, I didn't know even if I would get a degree. I just knew I wanted to change my life. But as I was there with the other people, I just really loved it there. I thought, well, I'll just keep coming. And eventually I thought, I should get a degree. I'm getting all these hours. And so I decided to get a master's in pastoral studies with emphasis in adult Christian formation. So the emphasis was on conversion and helping people come to know, that they're loved. And so that led me to wanting to be a companion in Bridges. So after I finished the exercises with Marion, I started going to Magis and, got the formation there. And then I served as a prayer companion for 2 years. At the same time, Marion suggested that I consider serving in the week of guided prayer, which was what turned into the moments of grace and prayer. And so I met with Sister Mary Funn. She was the one who brought it to St. Louis. And she brought it to St. Louis because Bridges was here first. So her experience with the week of guided prayer was first in England. So in England, the group of directors would travel from town to town. And when they got to town, everybody's invited. So it was very ecumenical and very much a retreat in everyday life and meet people where they are. And she really loved it. And so she wanted to get it started in the United States. So she moved back to Chicago. And the story goes, she couldn't find spiritual directors to work with. And so she visited a friend in St. Louis and learned of Bridges. And over that weekend decided she's moving here because she thought, well, the people in Bridges already have formation. They already have the Ignatian background. They can also serve as companions in the week of guided prayer. And so there's that connection. And so I was serving in the week of guided prayer and as a prayer companion in Bridges. And then in 2004, Mary said, I have these advisors and they're telling me, Mary, you're going to be 80 next year. You got to find somebody to take it over. And so she called me and asked me, and I immediately said yes, because it really fits with my passions and with my gifts. And I really, really love it. And so that's the connection. So I also served on the Bridges board for 5 years, again, because this connection between the two retreats. How Mary saw it, she saw it as a circular relationship that companions in Bridges would serve as companions in the week of guided prayer. Retreatants would come and learn of Ignatian spirituality, go on to do Bridges, then go on to get the formation as companions in Bridges, and then come back and be companions in the week of guided prayer. And that really has happened. There's a lot of overlap in the companions.
Yeah, certainly has been. Talk a little bit more about, for people who have not heard of Moments of Grace and Prayer, just give them a brief overview of what this looks like If you sign up for it, what's going to happen? What's expected? Um, what are you likely to get out of it?
Well, there are two components. So we invite you to pray on your own every day for like 20 minutes. And then you meet one-on-one with a spiritual companion, like in the month-long format, once a week for an hour. And it's a retreat in everyday life. So you don't have to go away anywhere. You just, you're in your everyday activities. It's very much individually directed. So we ask the person, what is your deep desire for the retreat? And we believe, like Ignatius, that our deep desires come from God.
Mm.
And so people come with different answers, but common ones are, I'd like to learn new ways to pray, or, I have an issue in my life that I'd like to pray about. I really could use a sense of accountability, like making time to pray, and, and everywhere in between.
Mm.
But we can really help with all three of those things. It's ecumenical, as you already said. So over the years, most of the retreats have been hosted at churches, and there have been churches of 12 different denominations that hosted our retreats. And many times, different denominational churches come together to co-host retreats, which just gets me so excited. It's very inclusive and accommodating. So we have, as our retreatants, priests, nuns, chaplains, spiritual directors, and then people who only pray with rote prayer, people who say, I'm not sure I believe in God, people who are homebound, people who are gay, lesbian, transgender. We also offer the option for people who are couples to participate as a couple, people who don't even live in the US. So we had one retreatant who lives in Australia. The retreat coming up on Sunday, we have someone who lives in Germany, people who live in nursing homes, people in their teens, people in their 90s. It just, we go to where the people are.
Yeah. Mm.
It's also an introduction to spiritual direction. Like I told in my story, most people never heard of spiritual direction.
Mm-hmm.
So they get to experience what this is, to be listened to with love. And I don't know, maybe 1 in 15 or to 20 people go on to engage in ongoing spiritual direction. And I maintain a list of directors, and I'm always available to help someone find a spiritual director.
Yeah. Do you have a story or two about kind of how you've seen people changed, transformed, helped by this ministry?
I have so many stories, so I'm happy to share some. So probably my favorite one is this woman I directed in a week-long retreat. And, I'm a big believer that it doesn't have to be complicated. Fundamentally, prayer is about relationship. And whenever we're talking about God, it's about love. And so, I suggested a couple times different ways to pray. And then on Wednesday of the retreat, I had suggested that she just imagine herself sitting on a park bench and Jesus is next to her and they're holding hands. It's very simple. And she came back on Thursday and she started to cry a little. And she said, why did it take me 73 years to come to know that Jesus loves me? And it kind of breaks your heart. But at the same time, now she knows. Yeah. And like me, and I was going to church every Sunday. I just had no idea that there really could be a personal relationship with God and Jesus. So that's one story. Another story, we did a retreat, at a retirement center, and many of the retreatants were retired nuns. And at the end, at the closing, where people can share, this nun said, I've been a principal and a teacher for 50 years. For 50 years, I struggled with my prayer life. I wish I would have learned 50 years ago what I learned on this retreat. It's very inspiring.
Yeah.
I had one woman, she was probably 30 and, busy, a young mother. And it was, again, a week-long retreat. On Tuesday, she came to me and she said, I tell my friends, I tell my sisters at church, I'm praying for you. But honestly, I don't even know what that means. And I thought, okay, well, let's see what happens. I didn't try to give her an answer. You have to find the answer yourself. God has to give it to you. So on Thursday of the retreat, she came and she said, on my way here this evening, there was an older woman who ran her car into a tree. And I just pulled over on the side of the road and just wished for her to feel safe and to feel that God was with her. It was like, there's your answer. That's what prayer is. One woman, I wasn't her director, but another person was, and the retreatant gave permission to share the story. So often we'll make suggestions like, use this scripture passage or use this poem or use this prayer technique. But all the suggestions are given in freedom. It's like, you can do it or not. It's up to you. Do what feels, comfortable and right. And so the woman came back and she said, what you suggested, that didn't appeal to me. I didn't do it. What I did instead is I rewrote Psalm 23. Is that okay? And of course the companion just said, well, yeah, it's okay. Would you read it to me, please? And so, the retreatant gave permission to share this, with, anybody. But what she had done, the Lord is my shepherd. She made it so personal. My shepherd. And she talked about how when she fell, she was in the hospital and how she felt God was with her and how, as her life progressed, she would feel safe and loved. Anyway, so yeah, those stories, they really are inspiring.
Thank you for sharing those. Yeah, I've been a spiritual reflector in your program on and off for 7 or 8 years, and those stories just ring and resonate really true to my own experience. It's always amazing because you work very prayerfully and very hard to match your spiritual reflectors with the retreatants coming in. But on the other hand, you don't really know, right? I mean, you're guessing a little bit and you're relying on the Holy Spirit. But I've never had a match that wasn't right, and that's more about God than about me or about you. Obviously, that's how the Spirit works.
It happens over and over and over again that both the companion and the retreatant feel like the match is really great. Yeah. It's like sometimes people say, it's like visiting with my grandma. I just feel loved. I feel safe. I feel comfortable. And people ask me many times, how did you do that? How did you know? Yeah. And I say, it was God. I just have like a little intuitive sense. But, up until a few years ago, all the registrations happened through the churches. And all I would know is the time of day the person wanted to meet, their name, their email address, and phone number. Sometimes they wouldn't even know their gender. And we have a rule that you can't companion anyone you know. So I'd route those names around. And then I would just pray about it and match. And it's just amazing how the matching works.
Yeah. Well, let's see, we're about 20 minutes in. I want to shift the conversation to another topic for a little bit. Before I do that, let me just remind anyone watching that if you have a question for Clarence about these moments of grace and prayer ministry or anything else, feel free to drop a comment in the Facebook section there, and we will see that. Clarence, I want to move on to talk about another aspect of your life and ministry, and that's your creative side. Of anyone who knows you knows that's a huge part of who you are and what you bring to whatever ministry you're involved in. So you are a poet, a writer, and you have a very unique approach to both of those things. So could you talk a little bit about that first, and then we're gonna share some of your art and some of your poetry as we close out this time together.
Yeah. So the poems that I write really, they come out of my spirit. They're like born of love. And when I first started writing poems is when my wife and I first started dating. And so I wrote her poems like for the first year that we were dating. And then it became dormant. And then a couple of years after the spiritual exercises, I was in, my prayer time, and this poem just bubbled up, and of course I was keeping a journal. I wrote it down. And then more and more and more poems came. And I don't really compose them. They just are there. And I write them down. And sometimes they're out of my experience. Sometimes they're kind of stimulated by something that I'll notice. And over the years, I've shared them with like retreatants and other companions, and gotten just a whole lot of affirmation and feedback that they're helpful for people.
Yeah, thank you. We just got a little shout out from our friend Dan Mose, telling us hello, and also from Michael Dolan. So thanks for listening, you guys. What about your art? What's your approach been to that?
That's an interesting story. So I don't think of myself as an artist. I took, introduction to art at Merrimack when I was in the college years. And all I learned out of that class was you can only draw what you see. And Clarence, you don't see very much. But when I was with Marion Cowan, she was an artist as well as spiritual director. And she said, Clarence, you might want to try non-dominant hand finger painting as a form of prayer. And I thought, no. And then a few months later, she said it again. I said, no. And then a few months later, she said it again. It's like, okay, I'll try it. And so I would, as part of the process, it's a non-thinking process. And think of, I'm an engineer, right? So very linear thinking, analytical. And so you engage the other side of your brain. And I just surrender all of myself to God. And, and it just, God, whatever is deep within me, help me to express it through this painting. And whatever you want to express to me, please let it happen. And so it's completely non-thinking. I don't even know how long it takes. I just really lose myself. And it's a lot about the colors, how the colors mean different things to me. And it's about expressing feelings. So I've probably done, I don't know, 300 or 400 paintings over the years. And I've written at least over 1,000 poems.
Wow. There's a couple places people can see some of your artwork and read some of your poems. One is your website, which we have on the screen there right now. That's www.clarenceheller.com. Another thing is a more recent thing that you've developed called A Piece of Goodness. It's on Facebook. Tell us a little. I got the address there, but can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Yeah. So A Piece of Goodness. What I was trying to do is, get this message out that we're all, children of God. We're all made of goodness. We're all human and divine, and we're all loved. And so many of my poems, they're not very religious. They're just really love poems. And so a lot of people can resonate with them. I write poems about being a grandparent and, being out in nature and that kind of stuff. And since I have so many, I thought, well, I'll just publish one, like every day. And we'll take a little excerpt, because many of my poems have kind of like not a punchline, but a line that sticks out. It's a little bit provocative, perhaps. And so a friend of mine works with me, and she puts together images that go with these. And so we post them on Facebook. They can also do it through an email that comes every day.
And check those out. Place of Goodness on Facebook. If you just go to Facebook and search for A Place of Goodness, you'll probably find it. But there's the full address right there. A couple more hellos from people before we move on to some poetry. Here's from my friend and colleague at Bridges, Deb Meister. She says she shared your journey at Aquinas. She was a class of 05. and now she's very involved in Bridges and Majas. She's our videographer for our Majas meetings, and a member of our board. So, and she went to UMR just like you.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Okay.
And then another note here from our friend Carol Brescia, longtime prayer companion and volunteer at Bridges, just checking in, loving the circular intertwined ministry.
Yeah. Yeah, I've known Carol. We've worked together from the very beginning. Yeah.
So let's move on. First of all, I know you want to read a poem first. Let me pull this up here. This a poem called "Mother." Does it need an introduction, or are you just going to?
So this is an example of how, the poems just come to me. And so I was praying at the park, one of my favorite places to pray. I was sitting at a park, a picnic table, and a lot of prayer is listening. And so I just looked over and I noticed a mother with her like 4-year-old, like 500 feet away at the playground. And so I got my journal out and I wrote "Mother." And then the rest just flowed. It took probably 5 minutes or less. She wiped his toddler nose and held his hand and told him stories as she sat on her lap, stories of the ancestors, ancient and recent, stories of her childhood. She expressed her joy and love and gratitude to him through her actions and words and in her prayers. She delighted in the times he and her husband spent together, learning how to saw and carve and nail, and how to invite God into everyday work, to begin and end the day the same way, in prayer. Her husband taught him about growing into a man, gentle, respectful, generous. She expected him to become a preacher, a rabbi, a leader, or a combination, but not a revolutionary. Yet her biggest surprise was that at his essence, he was a lover. He could melt hearts, dissipate fear, and heal hatred in those brave enough to spend time with him. And she knew his parents had not taught this precious gift, although they welcomed and encouraged it. No, this most precious, essential gift was God's self living in him, a gift he shared so freely, a gift that we all have been given, a gift we are challenged and to accept and to live.
Thank you very much for that. Another quick hello from the Reverend Sally Weaver, saying she's glad to be listening to us today. Thank you, Sally, for being here. I'm going to add some artwork to the page here. That's the second one. So let me get this one out of the way. So, too many things up here. Let's see. All right. So this is a piece of art called "Courageous."
Yeah.
And it has
So
a poem.
So most often a poem comes to me, and sometimes I'll do a painting, a few days later, maybe a week or two later, again, trying to enter into that experience or that feeling and express it. And so this poem, "Courageous," really is talking about an experience I had at Mass after receiving communion. Courageous. Aloud, I spoke the most courageous words that could ever be spoken. God, I give you permission to take me into your arms and love me. And immediately I began to feel embraced, not by what came from afar, but by the divinity within my core that emanated to surround itself and me within it. Warm, safe, lost and found, complete and unitive, alive and well. And the delusion of fading in and out of closeness was shattered, replaced by an abiding knowing of the deepest intimacy that nothing could diminish. Whether felt or not, whether aware or not, I am part of I am. And now I am ready, truly ready, to live a courageous life. So in this painting, there's a deep sense of peace in me and a sense of unity and oneness with God. And part of what I'm really attracted to is the unknowable aspect of God, the mystery of God. And in my paintings, I use black to represent that often. And I use blue to represent peace. And so in the center, there are a couple figures, and that's me and this emanating that's going on that I talked about.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap things up a little bit here, and then we'll end with one more poem. But I want to thank Clarence, you first of all, not only for being here, but those of us who have had the chance to know you over the years know that you are always courageous, authentic, and vulnerable, not afraid to show emotion. That is what we love and respect about you, and we know it's what you bring to your ministry. So we're thankful for that, and thank you for being here. If you're interested in moments of grace and prayer, here's the website for that. If you're interested in learning more about Bridges and what we do, our 9-month experience of the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, please visit our website at bridgesfoundation.org. We will have another conversation about a month from today on Thursday, November 9th at noon. And I don't even know who I'm going to talk to yet. Got a couple balls up in the air, but we'll be here with someone I trust. So please mark your calendar. We're going to go ahead and end this with one more piece of art. Let me get rid of this. And one more poem from Clarence, and then we're gonna take it out.
Thank you, Steve. So this poem, as far as I remember, I woke up, and it was there. It was there. It's like just inviting me to, get up and write it down. And so I did. And then, of course, the painting came later. Pure prayer may flow when there's no other choice. Pure prayer may flow when there's no other way. Losing yourself completely in love needs no particular words to think, hear, or say. Pure prayer may flow without mention of God, grace, church, or the one we adore. Pure prayer may flow as action, giving every bit of our lives and more. Pure prayer is how I aspire to be, live, grow, and do. Joining with God, abandoning myself in loving you. And you can tell again from the painting just how it feels like there's flowing. There's this sense of flowing and, just in the flow of God's Spirit. It's just such that's how I want to live, and it's so beautiful when you feel that you're in that. And then it's maybe hard to see, but this is a good example of how sometimes in my paintings, things come out that I don't consciously intend. And kind of in the middle, there's this little red and white dot that looks like a bird. And if I would have shared that with my spiritual director, I'm sure she would have pointed it out if I hadn't noticed it. And so I just think maybe it's a reference to the Holy Spirit. Maybe it's a reference to beauty of nature. Maybe it's a reference to freedom, how birds can fly and they're just so free. And maybe it's all of those.
Yeah. Well, listen, we need to wrap it up. Thank you again, Clarence, very much for your time. Thank you all for tuning in and listening. We'll be back in about a month. And until then, be well and do well and live every day like it's the important day that it is. Thank you all very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.